as the Vikings stare down the barrel of a tank year, and they tried so hard to avoid that. Boy, you guys have thoughts about this. It's Twitter Tuesday on Locked On Vikings.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, hello, hi, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much. You guys are doing great. We are almost there. One more Twitter Tuesday until the Vikings play real, meaningful football in New York against the Giants. So thank you so much for hanging out all offseason. We are almost done with it. Regular season is here. And thank you so much if you are new here. Hello and welcome. You can find this show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Just search out Locked On Vikings anywhere you listen to your favorite shows, including SiriusXM. There you can find live broadcasts of Vikings games, hometown broadcasts, the Paul Allen and the crew. Just search out Vikings on SiriusXM on the app. You can also find the show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. It is Twitter Tuesday today. That means I'm answering your questions you sent me via the Google form at that's linked in the show notes, or email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. I always put a call out on Twitter. Housekeeping, by the way, somebody asked, one of the questions, the Twitter Tuesday questions was, how can I submit stuff like bold predictions? That's just always going to be on Twitter. Sorry. You can try. Look, you can try using, if you want to try and you don't have a Twitter or X account, you can go to the Google form and put whatever you want in there. But when I'm like the preparation process that I have when I do the bold predictions, because I usually get more than enough on Twitter, I don't go to the other things for that. So you can try, but I just can't guarantee that I'll find it. But yeah, you can hit them up, the YouTube comment, do whatever you can. First question that I am going to take from the mailbag today comes from a Vikings fan who asks, why are so many national outlets projecting the Vikings as the worst team in the NFL? Surely a team with Justin Jefferson, Christian Darrisaw, and the edges / linebackers on defense can't be a 3-win team, right? So I don't know what media you're consuming, but if you want to go by like FanDuel's odds, FanDuel has the Vikings as a 7.5 win team. There are plenty of 6.5 and 5.5 win teams. That's a below average team, but it's not the worst in the league. So you might be listening to like a hot take show and getting mad about their hot take, but like it's a hot take. The reasons for the Vikings to struggle, I mean, really it just boils down to people thinking Sam Darnold is QB. I think Sam Darnold bad. He's probably the 29th best QB in my eyes. So I'm going to say that, the Vikings are the 29th best team. But to have a 3-win season, like you're saying, like more has to go wrong than what the Vikings are looking at right now. To be like truly drafting top 2, you're going to have to see like bad injury luck. You're going to have to see bad close game luck. Like other stuff is going to have to compound. Nothing is stopping it, but you're going to have to parlay a lot of outcomes. So I don't know if that's necessarily the way that the like national opinion is. It's not high on them, but it's not quite as low on them as it is on, say, the Panthers, where it's just despair, or the Raiders that just look like this is just, I don't know how this season is supposed to even launch them forward. There are a lot of questions on this topic, though, of just staring down the barrel of like a down year. And like, what do we do about that? The next one comes from a curious team building enjoyer who says, great pod last week on how Kwesi's competitively rebuilt the team the last 2 years. As a non-Vikings fan, I don't think I appreciated what they've been doing until I listened to your pod. That being said, do you think the approach might be too slow for the division that they're in? So for one, thank you very much. That's kind of the non-Vikings fans, the people that I was really talking to there. But is it too slow? I think the whole point of it is that it's not as slow, is that it saves crucial time. Time is the resource, I think, like if we want to talk resource management, draft picks, cap space, all that, even like roster space and like the resources that teams have access to. Time is not an infinite one. It's infinite for us as fans because you can't fire the fans, but everybody on the Vikings right now will eventually leave the Vikings. They are here for a finite amount of time. That is how the human lifespan works. That's how it is. So saving on that time is crucial. It doesn't matter what division you're in, right? I don't think that means you have to be in more or less of a hurry if your division is perceived as good or bad. Like if your division is soft, that's maybe even more of a reason to be in a hurry because you want to strike while the iron is hot. So the fact that they're in a division where the PR around the Lions, Bears, and Packers is all really good doesn't affect how much of a hurry you should be. And you should always be in a hurry because guys like Justin Jefferson don't get any younger. You only have so many years of that. We've got a lot more in front of us than we have behind us, that's for sure, but it ain't infinite. So wasting years of Justin Jefferson, or wasting maybe a more salient example is wasting the final year of Harrison Smith, most likely. Kind of sucks. But wasting 3 years sucks more. And the whole idea was that they didn't try to waste 2022 and 2023. Yeah, they fell short of where they wanted to be. And we can critique why. But the issue with those years wasn't trying. And if you disagree with me, you're a quitter. Kind of definitional. Like that's what quitters think about. They say, oh, you should have quit. This is just the dictionary definition quitter. And I will continue to call people quitters that want the team to tank. As mad as they will get at me, they can cry about it into their quit pillows. King Poles Enthusiast, oh boy, asks, do you think there are some Vikings fans that are too thrown off by the possibility of a tank year? Seeing some replies to the Athletic Football Show and Seth Walder, and it seems like some Vikings fans don't want to go through a season where they end up with a top 3 pick, but sometimes a season like that is needed to jumpstart and finish the rebuild. Okay, Bears fan. It didn't work out for you guys unless if the Panthers have a normal year after drafting a quarterback first overall. I'll tell you that much. That's the thing about like the Ryan Poles like rebuild is that they fully tanked to get the number 1 overall pick, traded it, ended up with Darnell Wright and DJ Moore, and that just absolutely would not have been enough to turbocharge their rebuild if the Panthers didn't also end up picking first overall. The Bears would have been 9th. And they would have been fighting with the Vikings and Giants in trade-ups for J.J. McCarthy if the Panthers didn't. So there was an element of luck there. And get lucky is a great strategy. I'll give that to the Bears. But to actually answer the question, I think a lot of Vikings fans don't know how good they've had it. Truly, like the key thing, and if King Poles Enthusiast is more inundated in the Bears world than the Vikings world, I'll tell you this much. The Vikings media machine at all levels, from the like classic legacy newspapers all the way down to the blogosphere and social media, like all of the levels of media from legacy to digital have been dominated by the thought heuristic of, if we're not going to win the Super Bowl this year, why would we spend anything to try? I think like Stephon Gilmore, right? Well, the Vikings are going to be bad. Why would they spend $10 million on a corner? Why not just roll that over for a year where they're good? And by that logic, you can essentially undo every single thing the team has ever done ever. Like Fran Tarkenton, terrible. Why would they spend a draft pick on a QB? They didn't even win all those years. Why would they trade back for him? They didn't even win the Super Bowl. That was awful. Terrible mismanagement by Jim Finks. Like that logic would make trading Randy Moss to the Raiders and then drafting Troy Williamson the greatest move that they've made in their history, because they weren't going to win in 2005. So why keep that player? Why not get new young talent, right? Like that's the kind of logic that we're very inundated in. But really, what that kind of tells me is we're spoiled by 9-win seasons. That 9-win seasons are watchable. They are enjoyable. Sometimes they're frustrating, and we wish that they are better, and pushing for them to try to be better is absolutely in bounds. Pushing for them to be worse, like after losses and then saying, why didn't we lose more? I hate this. Never made a lot of sense to me. So we'll just see exactly how many people are truly built for this. So I've got a bunch more questions that aren't actually about tanking that I will get to next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. It is football grambling time. Monitor this space for some very cool grambling stuff coming up for the weekly in-season version of Locked On Vikings. But for now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 on anything and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime, but otherwise you get a 3-week free trial just for betting $5 on anything. So if you disagree with me, and boy, a lot of you do, and think that the Vikings hitting over 7.5 wins is a lock, go bet it at FanDuel. Put your money where your mouth is, and if you win, guess what? The odds there are actually super cheap because people are hammering that under. So go check it out at FanDuel.com. Put down $5, get your 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket, and go to FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. Hey! Locked On NFL has changed. It is different. I have been on Locked On NFL for like 3 years now. Used to do Tuesdays with Ross, and now I'm on Wednesdays. Wednesdays in the morning with Tyler, the Madman Rowland. Tyler, he does Locked On Titans. We will cross over with him later in the year. He's completely insane. He's a maniac. Get your AM radio insane espresso shot with him, and then you can actually chill out. Locked On NFL is uploading now twice as often. 100% increase because they've got a PM show now hosted by Tony Wiggins chilling at the barbershop. So go check that out. Let's move on with this Twitter Tuesday episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. The next one comes from Jack, who asks, there's no denying Justin Jefferson is a generational talent, but I was curious if you had to give what would be his biggest flaw or hole in his game. I don't want to do that. So I think I might not. Yeah, nope, I'm not going to do it. Shove off, Jack. Ryan asks, do we get to throw out this week? No, you know what? I have to. Okay, Jack, I have to. Yeah, I have to. I would say that athletically, he's got good enough athleticism to do everything, and having that all around is like a big strength. But he's not as fast as Tyreek Hill. He doesn't have the like testable, measurable athleticism. And I think he's kind of a testament to, as long as you hit the floors on all those things, that being ridiculous at them doesn't necessarily make you a better receiver. Like, he ran a 4.43. It's a good 40, but it's not an elite 40. So it's probably that. But it very clearly it does not slow him down very much. Okay, Ryan asks, do we get to throw out this week 1 matchup performance of Blake Brandles if it's bad because of Dexter Lawrence? So I love this question because this is the way that I'm going to do things on Patreon. I will almost certainly do a Blake Brandle one on Patreon this week because I'm so curious about how he does, and I like talking about O-line. But the way that I handle that, like, we have to stop lying to ourselves. It's a skill. It is a skill to look at an O lineman and a D lineman and determine who made a good play and who made a bad play. Or if they both made a good play, but one of them won. Or if they, he did everything right, but boy, just what a crazy play from Dexter Lawrence. If you just want to look at the PFF grade, then you probably just have to do your own opponent adjusting in your mind, because PFF grades don't opponent adjust, and they actually have their reasons for doing that, but they don't. Like, that you can get your butt kicked by Dexter Lawrence, and a worse player can go kick the crap out of some undrafted rookie, and PFF will tell you that you had the worst game because they do not opponent adjust. But also, if you're looking at a PFF grade, you're not learning anything anyways. So you just have to adjust your zero and come out with a different kind of nothing. You're not really challenging yourself to grow, I think, if you're just looking at that and adopting that as your opinion and moving forward. I really want to challenge people to think for themselves a little bit more, especially with I'll say what has come out recently about PFF and its process and especially the process of grades and just how little the grades had propelled the company to the success that it had. How much it had to do with stuff that wasn't the grades. I think we can really cleanly move that away from our heuristic. I know you're not asking about the PFF grades, but I think that's part of it is like, no matter what I say, a lot of people are going to wait for somebody to tweet out the PFF grades or for them to get written up in an article or something, and then that's going to be their opinion of how Blake Brandel did. And that's not opponent adjusted. But the skill of determining, hey, did Dexter Lawrence make a really good play here, or did Blake Brandel mess up? That is not, there's not one simple, clean trick to it. You just have to understand enough of what both of those guys were trying to do to make it happen. And that's going to be kind of the way that I try to focus my content, is going to be on digging into that and analyzing that part of it and trying to provide an answer to that question. Play by play though, right? Like you can have Dexter Lawrence can have a good play and then a bad play. So you have to go play by play, and you can't just use the name and say, hey, great block or bad block, but this was against Dexter Lawrence, so I'm going to, forgive it. If you messed up your footwork and you let a guy through, I don't care whose name was on the back of that guy's jersey, get your footwork right, Ryan also asks, do you think that Kwesi is more likely to overcome the sunk cost fallacy when evaluating bottom of the roster players? Wouldn't his background in economics dictate that current value is far more important than what was spent to obtain that player? Bottom line, why is a 6th or 7th round pick more valuable than an undrafted free agent who can ball? Well, so you're basically getting at Jaquelin Roy here. Jaquelin Roy is a 5th round pick, and he just had his job forcibly snatched from him by Taki Taimani. That guy looked like a better tackle. And I don't think Jaquelin Roy had a particularly bad preseason. I don't know. I mean, I didn't see a lot from it one way or another. And I saw a ton from Taki Taimani, but he just took a job from you. And so, yeah, there is to keep Jaquelin Roy over Taki Taimani is a mistake that is so often made that I just assumed it would happen. And I got that wrong on my 53-man roster. But yes, I do think that he is now showing quite a bit of willingness to move on now that we've got draft picks headed into their 3rd year, which by year 3, So that means we know that scene didn't work. We know that Booth didn't work. We don't have question marks, right? Right now, we don't really know how good somebody like Walter Rouse is, right? We've seen one preseason. We're super question marks all over that. But Booth, we knew, and we got rid of him. So yeah, I think Kwesi is showing very much a willingness to move on from things that don't work out. And as drafts continue to pile up here, you're probably going to see half a draft classes going away, because that's about a reasonable clip, is that half a draft classes don't give you what you paid for. Like, look at any draft class. It's not hit after hit after hit, man. Like it's 50-50 at best. I have a whole bunch more questions. I got a little bit long-winded on you there for those ones. So we are going to go rapid fire right after this. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime. It's the best place to find last-minute tickets to anything, whether they are sports games, concerts, theater, comedy shows, whatever you're in the mood for. You're looking for something on a Saturday night. Maybe you want to head to a Twins game because the clouds opened up and maybe we're going to have a great chance to go. Whatever it is, you can find it at Gametime, and you can save up to 60% buying last minute, just because of how the ticket market warps so crazy when you're getting up to the event. And you can even buy tickets from Gametime an hour into the event. And the Gametime guarantee means that they will credit you 110% of the difference if you find the same row and section somewhere else for less. So I tried to do this. I just bought my tickets for I'm going to go to the Jaguars game in Jacksonville this year, and I just bought my tickets. And I tried really hard to find it because I wanted my Gametime guarantee thing. Couldn't do it. And if you want to see what it was after the fees, you can just click all-in pricing. That's a toggle you can turn on for that. So go to the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL. You can get $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Today's episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is online therapy made easy. So if you've been thinking about getting into therapy, but there's all these barriers that make you maybe not want to try to get into therapy, like you can't make it work with your schedule, or maybe you had a bad experience with a therapist and you think all therapy is like that. A lot of guys especially have that experience where they'll set themselves up with a therapist, they won't like what happens, and then they'll think that every therapist is going to be like that, and they never try it again, and they'll say something like, oh, therapy's not for me. Try somebody else. Let BetterHelp hook you up with somebody that they think is right for you. And hey, if you don't like that person, you can switch at any time for no additional cost. No judgment, no nothing. Try a few people out. I super recommend that you do that because finding a therapist that's right for you is a really important part of that process. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off of your first month. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Moving on here with Twitter Tuesday on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Let's try to rip through the last of these quickly. Maurice Morth asks, why am I still mad about JJ missing his rookie season? Probably because you haven't given yourself the space to grieve something you were excited about. I think we were all excited to watch JJ McCarthy. That was taken away from us, and we all have to grieve it in our own ways. And if it's still lingering, even though we're several weeks past that now, you probably haven't let yourself accept that this is going to be different. There's an image that goes around Twitter every once in a while that I really liked. It's like this dog sitting in a submerged lawn chair that looks like it's at a lake, and it just says it's going to be okay, but it's going to be different. Good Thunder Guy asks, players on the PUP list are eligible to return after 4 games. The two players on IR with a return designation can return after 4 games. This might be wrong, but it also seems like neither category counts towards the initial 53-man roster. You're correct there. I would also assume that both could be transferred to the year-long IR at a later date. So what's the difference, and why was the PUP used on Hawkinson and the IR return designation was used on Reisner and Murphy? So functionally, they are very, very similar things. Those 3 players are all out for 4 games. When they're ready to come for at least 4 games, when they're ready to come back, they have a 21-day window to practice with the team and sort of ramp back up. And then they have to either be put on the active roster or put back on season-ending IR, and then that's it for the season. There's no more recourse. You also have 8 IR to return designations throughout the whole season. Player now, at any point in the season, can be put on IR with a designation to return. That will keep them out for 4 games at least, but for, say, a hamstring injury or something like that, that'll work the same way, and you can use up to 8 a year. So the reason that it was only the 2 got to be put on IR was because you can only do that twice. If there was a difference, they could do it with they would do it with TJ Hawkinson. There's a small difference that if you're on PUP instead of IR, you can participate in more team activities. So Hawkinson, you can't participate in like 7-on-7 or like any real drills, but you can be more involved with the team than you can on IR, where it's like truly only rehab and you very often don't even take the field. So that's one of the differences. The other one is that a player can only be put on IR and then taken off twice in a year. So now, like Gabe Murphy, if he got put on IR and then let's say he gets hurt again and he comes back and then he gets hurt again and gets put on it a second time, comes back, gets hurt again, like that. If that keeps happening, there comes a point where your season's just over. That feels like a rarity, but it is a difference worth mentioning, I suppose. Valentine asks, who would you say is the most under-recognized player on the Vikings right now, both inside the Vikings fan base as well as in the general NFL fan base? Inside the Vikings fan base is tougher. My answer for both will be Jonathan Bullard. I think Jonathan Bullard is a good player. He is not a world beater. I don't think that he is as disruptive as Harrison Phillips is, for example. But he does his job. He does it well. He makes plays in the run game. He pushes the pocket the way that he's supposed to. He's not your premier pass rusher, what D tackle is. And I think he just is sort of still suffering from that stink of being a random free agent we didn't really pay attention to when we signed him. But he has earned and then some a stranglehold on a starting gig. I think that's worth something. And nationally, also, I should always mention Harrison Smith for this. I think Harrison Smith is one of those players that will never, ever make the Hall of Fame, but in my heart, he should. And that's just because of a bunch of things. The biggest thing is like not having a whole bunch of all pros because he shared the field with Troy Polamalu and Earl Thomas and like a lot of these other guys that just got more PR. And I honestly think that Harrison Smith being a sort of strong silent type has a lot to do with that. You heard from Earl Thomas more. You didn't really hear from Harrison Smith, but he always played really, really, really good football, was such a weapon for Zimmer and even for, well, not for Donatel, because Donatel didn't know what he was doing there. Different thing. But now for Flores as well, like he's such a weapon. And he's a legend among Vikings fans. I don't think Vikings fans underrate Harrison Smith, but I do think nationally they do. But not like, I think the difference between how good Bullard is and how much credit he gets is probably the widest. Chris asks, out of the three main players in the edge rusher group, Van Ginkel, Grenard, and Turner, who do you see kicking inside on clear passing downs? My guess would be Turner. That's a lot to do with the quickness that he rushes with. Van Ginkel and Grenard, I could see Grenard. I don't want it to be Van Ginkel necessarily because I'd rather have him dropping into the flat. That requires a little bit more range. And maybe that's Dallas Turner too, who can do that. So maybe you have those guys on the outside, you have them drop to the flats and sim pressures, and then Grenard in the middle taking on like a guard. Feels pretty good, but I could see switching Grenard and Turner, having Turner on the inside against somebody's slow guard, doing something quickness, doing something with length, because guards tend to have shorter arms. So you can use that reach advantage. And then you just don't drop Grenard into coverage. He dropped 8 times into coverage last year for the Texans, so that's not really his skill set. Matt Freeze asks, the Giants and Vikings. Okay, we're into the Vikings-Giants preview questions now. So first one comes from Matt Freeze, who asks, by the way, listen to Kindred Skulls. I've been on that one a couple times. I love it. Love what you guys do there, Matt. The Vikings and Giants staff started on similar timelines and kind of chose different paths forward after the 2022 playoff game. What's one thing you think the Giants have done better than the Vikings have in that time? Do you realize how hard this question is to answer? I don't think they drafted better since 2022. I think of all of the players in those drafts that the Giants and Vikings have taken, unless Malik Neighbors is the truth the way he's supposed to be. But really, there's only been one draft, and Jordan Addison is the best player out of both those drafts. The Giants got John Michael Schmitz, who was a catastrophe at center, and Deonte Banks, who has been a fine rookie, but whatever. Like, Jordan Addison kind of took the world by storm in Justin Jefferson's absence. So the Vikings have drafted better. Free agent signings, I think the Vikings have been smarter about. The Giants had their Brian Burns thing, so maybe that's the thing, is they went and got a real name gigantic edge rusher by acquiring Brian Burns. Maybe I can say that answer. But honestly, I think there's a reason that the future, the Giants are one of those teams that truly everybody agrees should be on the bottom of the league this year. Nobody believes in them at all. Nobody believes in Daniel Jones, especially without Saquon Barkley. I think there is some excitement about Malik Neighbors, but I think appropriately it's tempered because he's a rookie. Nobody believes in Brian Dable now. Nobody thinks that the Giants are going anywhere. They see this as a lame duck year where everybody's going to get fired at the end of it. And it's kind of on the Giants to prove them wrong. But I guess, I don't know, they got Brian Burns. We let our Brian Burns go. I guess you could say that, but even that feels like you're being super reductive. Rob Webb asks, in recent memory, has there been a more important or pivotal week 1 game for the Vikings? Most of them? What do you mean? This is the least important week 1 game I think we've had in a while. Just 2022 against the Green Bay Packers. Just go back 2 years. Last year against the Bucs, I do think was more important than this one because it was ultimately the final Kirk Cousins year and it was our chance to get off to a hot start and we failed. But the year before that, setting the tone of the season by blowing out the Packers at home, setting the tone of the Kevin O'Connell experience by blowing out the Packers at home, just feels like so much of a bigger moment than this one ever could be. This might be the least important game on the schedule all week for any team. These are two teams that have very, very long playoff odds. It just feels that by November, nobody will care about what happened in this game unless one of these teams really blows up. So I don't think so. I think you're getting a little bit of this week sure feels like a must-win syndrome. Maybe I should go back to posting that before every game. This is a must-win, everybody. And even week 15, I did that. By week 15, people were still taking that seriously. Max asks, I remember a video you made last season on how the Vikings use different projection calls to nullify Nick Bosa in the 49ers game. Looking forward to week 1, what adjustments can be made to slow down Dexter Lawrence on the inside? So I went back and looked at the video that I was talking about. A lot of that was TJ Hawkinson doing a good job, Josh Oliver doing a good job, and crucially Christian Darrisaw doing a good job when he was left on an island. But one of the things about Nick Bosa, this doesn't have anything to do with Dexter Lawrence, but one of the things about Nick Bosa, this was after the 49ers game Monday night last year. One thing about Nick Bosa and the 49ers is that they love to line him up at wide 9 alignment. That means that he is way far to the outside of the tackle. And that gives him a lot of space. He's fast, so he can close that space down quickly. And it gives him a lot of space to get the right kind of timing and the right kind of steppage that sets up whatever pass rush move he wants to do. He's really good at utilizing that extra space. So what the Vikings wanted to do was to crunch down and close that extra space. So you would see Christian Darrisaw jump set him. Jump set's a risky pass set. It's where you literally like jump in right into the guy's face, take the phone booth to him, and say, I'm coming to where you are and we're fighting now. I'm not letting you come to me like what's more standard on pass protection. But it's a very risky thing because you can get olayed like a charging bull and then you've lost the rep. So playing that against Nick Bosa is unhinged, but Darrisaw did a phenomenal job and got the better of Bosa in that game. Dexter Lawrence doesn't use the same stuff, so it's not a good comparison, really. But I know that's not really what you're asking. The Darrisaw or the Dexter Lawrence problem is that he is just too skilled of a pass rusher for how big he is to be easy to handle. So he can just bull rush you like any D tackle would. And the second you do anything to try to get really good anchor and really stabilize yourself, he can use his hands, he can get around you, he can use that quickness. So the key is probably just going to be not being one-on-one with him as often as possible. And probably not running a lot of inside zone. You probably want a little more outside zone just to run kind of away from him and neutralize his penetration because he will penetrate on you. But pass pro wise, you just want to slide your protection such and call your protection such that you know you're going to get a double team on Dexter Lawrence. And that's the cat and mouse because what they're going to be doing on the other side is trying to get one-on-ones for Dexter Lawrence. And you just have to sort of call your protection such that it denies that it forces him to be on the slide side and that somebody else has to win. That's what you wanted. Like you want this to come down to Darrisaw versus Kayvon Thibodeau. That's a matchup you can say, okay, if our protection comes down to that, sure, you don't want this to come down to Dexter Lawrence versus Garrett Bradbury or Ed Ingram. That's just a mismatch. We will tomorrow, we're going to do a little offense preview, kind of like we did the defense preview on Monday, although that was more of a Grenard episode, but still, we'll preview the offense in a more general sense. Thursday is Crossover Thursday with Pat Traina of Locked On Giants. And then Friday, I got some special stuff in store for you, including some old classic favorites and something new. So I'm excited for that. Hope you guys enjoy it. I will see you all for all of that. And as always, Skol.